everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle. Each week we take up a topic from our Still and Moving Center Almanac with the theme in this year of 2023 of Citizens of the Future. Our topic this week is our inextinguishable flame, the name for which comes from a D.H. Lawrence poem called Resurrection. I'll read a single line from that poem. I lift my inextinguishable flame of immortality into the world. Today, to talk to us about this idea of an inextinguishable flame, or about some sense of immortality, with the idea that, according to Edward Bellamy, we are now living our immortal lives. So it's not something we have to wait for. We are now living our immortal lives. So to talk to us today from the Hindu tradition, we're very fortunate to have Professor Ramdas Lam from UH Manoa. Ramdas has been a very, very lifelong student of Hinduism and lived as a sadhu in India for almost a decade before returning here to share with his American counterparts some of the teachings and wisdoms that he gained while he was there. So Ramdas, we're so pleased and fortunate to have you join us.
Sure, thank you. So I'm going to be talking today about the concept of, and I kind of lost everyone. There we go. Okay, this concept of immortality. It's interesting, in the last 4 or 5 months, 4 significant people in my life have traveled on. Now, in my monastic tradition, they refer to it as body being completed. So the word death never comes up. It's someone's body has been completed. In other words, it served its purpose. It has completed its task. Or they say the body has been left. The being has left the body. But it's this idea that there's not such a thing as death. There is only transition. And when we start thinking about it, scientists tell us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And so there is a life energy within the body. Then the life energy leaves. It doesn't die away because energy is never destroyed. All it does is it moves somewhere. It goes to another realm. And so there is this continuation. The earliest burial sites are approximately 100,000 years old that have been discovered so far. And in these burial sites, they find tools. Of course, they were stone tools, the remnants of what appeared to have been foodstuffs. So when when their bodies would be completed, the people there would leave things for them to use in their future existence. So this concept of a future existence is not something new. It's something that has been around since the time people have been around. And so there's this issue about some sort of eternalness. And different people have come up with it in different ways, and then others have said it doesn't exist. There is no eternalness. And it's interesting, we talk about an eternal flame. The Buddhist concept is the Buddhist concept is nirvana. Okay, and what nirvana means actually is no light. So the vana is the lamp, and the nirvana is the lamp has gone out. And the idea that the lamp of duality, the light that shows us duality, that has gone away. And what is left is shunyata, or people will translate that as the void. It means no thingness. We can translate it as nothingness, or we can translate it as no thingness. So in that light, I was at the Center for the Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies in Sarnath in July. And I was there for a week, and there was a series of talks that were going on. And I had a group of teachers from America who were with me, and I was kind of guiding them through a variety of experiences in India. And one of the Tibetan teachers, he had gotten his PhD. I mean, you can get a PhD at the center there. It's a Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, and he had got it on the concept of chitta. Now, what Buddhists refer to as chitta is when one's body is full and there is gone to the next. Many of them will say there's no such thing as the soul, but it's the chitta that goes on. And okay, and so I was asking this Lama, what is chitta? And I said, how would you translate it into English? And so we're talking in Hindi, but he also knew English. And so I said, how would you translate that into English? And he said, primordial consciousness. So I said, well, if it's primordial consciousness, does that not mean it is eternal? And he said, absolutely. And if that means it is eternal, then I asked him, what is the difference between that and the Hindu concept of Brahman? He said, there's no difference. There's just words we use. He said, ultimately, there is the eternal. There is eternity. And different people in response or in reaction to some concept will have a different concept, but that ultimately, he said, the belief that there is something eternal, that there is, whether it's an existence, whether it is no thingness, whatever it is, that there is eternity. And we will all remain a part of that eternity in some form or in no form. And oftentimes it will be no form, but that is a formless form. And so it's a really fascinating thing when the more that you look into concept of immortality, the more that it seems to be confusing, and yet the more that everyone seems to be saying something kind of similar. And that's fascinating. And this Tibetan Lama and I had a really a great interchange. We spoke for about an hour about this thing, about this issue. And so the takeaway for me was that we all understand that there is eternity, and that how we explain eternity, there's nothing. And so we can say, well, ultimately there's not going to be anything, because I see things created and so things die, and therefore at one point there will be no thing left or nothing. Or we can say, I know I have never seen, and this is what Jains say, creation didn't happen, it's eternal. And if you say creation happened, then how can you prove it? Were you there? Can you replicate it? Isn't that science? Science tells us that it needs to be seen, measured, and replicated. And can anyone do that to creation? Can anybody do that to the Big Bang, etc.? No. And so the Jains say, none of that matters. What matters is right now. Right now we are here. Right now there is existence, and existence will continue, and it will be forever. And so we have a job to do. We have a duty to do, and that's to get the fulfillment of our purpose here. And then different traditions have different things. So in my monastic order, I was taught that there are three bodies, and there is the physical body, and that's what gets full, gets completed, and then begins to break down. The life force that's in it moves onto something else. And the body doesn't die, because the body actually how many living things are in each of our bodies. There are millions of living organisms in our bodies, and when the life force that we identify with leaves, they continue in their forms, and then they start breaking down and become other things, right? And they become food for other things, et cetera, et cetera. So, but that's the physical body. So we have the physical body, and we do a process, and then we get to the end of that physical body when it is complete, and then we move on. And now where do we go? So there are two bodies left. There is the subtle body, and that's the Sanskrit for it is the sukshma sharira, which means literally subtle body. And that is where we have our body of karma. That's where we have our fears, our desires, our knowledge, our ignorance, all the things associated with our karma, all of our emotions, all of our thoughts, all of that stuff. And that carries with us. And when I talk about the concept of reincarnation with my students at the university, I explain to them about going to school. So you're in first grade, and then you leave, and you're gone. You die as a first grader. You will never be a first grader again, probably. I mean, not this lifetime. And then you come back as a second grader. And then you die to that, and you come back as a third grader. And when you get into the university, you are a first semester freshman. And then you die to that, and you become a second semester freshman. And depending upon how many units you get, then you will become a sophomore, and then first semester, second semester, a junior, et cetera. And then you go on to graduate school. And each time you leave and you come back, and usually you forget most of what you learned, just like we do from lifetime to lifetime. But one thing carries with you. And in the spiritual traditions, we call it the book of karma. And at the university, they call it your grade point, right? Your GPA, your transcript. And that carries with you, and it's say, oh, in that semester, this is what you did. So you have to take that one over again. And it's kind of like in life, in that last lifetime, you didn't get the lesson. So you have to do it over again, right? Did you have a question, Renee, or comment? Okay. So it's very much along that way. And then we continue and we continue and we continue to learn more. And each time we learn more, it gets a little harder, hopefully, because if it's not getting harder, that means we're not being given the opportunity to grow. And then eventually we get to the point where we graduate. Now, and what does that mean? So for many people say that, well, in Hindu tradition, that means you're liberated and you don't come back again. Well, that depends on the order that you're in and the beliefs within that order. So in the Ramananda order, which is the order that I'm in, we believe that liberation simply means you no longer come back here to work out your own karma. You have done that. It's like once you get 124 credits at the university, if you get them in all the right things, you meet all your requirements, then you can graduate. You don't have to graduate. You can graduate and then you don't come back anymore, at least as an undergraduate. Or you cannot fill out the goldenrod. The goldenrod is the form that you do during the last semester to say, I intend to graduate. And you can continue to take classes forever. You come back and you sign up for more classes. But now, why would you do that? Well, you could do that to come back and help your friends graduate. That's, the Buddhists call that the bodhisattva vow, right? I shall not seek liberation until all beings are liberated. And in the Ramananda order, we just call that eternal devotion. So, and there's a beautiful verse in Tulsidas where he says, it's Bharat, the son of, the brother of Ram, who is saying, there's four fruits of life, artha, dharma, kama, moksha. So artha is like material possessions, dharma is spirituality, kama is sensual pleasures, and then moksha is liberation. And he says, artha, dharma, kama, moksha. I don't want any of those. He says, none of those are my desire. My desire is that I can come back and serve the divine birth after birth after birth. So this idea that immortality is reality, that we grow and we learn and then we teach others, and then we grow and we learn and we let one body go and get another body, and we continue to teach, and then we learn and we grow, and when the body doesn't work too well anymore, we get rid of it and we come back and with another body and whatever. So I was talking with one of the heads of our order because of a book I'm writing. This is the first head of our order who I interviewed, and I interviewed him in 1973. That was the first time I interviewed him. So I interviewed him again in 2016. Actually, it was shortly before he passed away. And so we talked about kind of that first interview and some of the questions that I had asked him. And then I said to him, I was talking to him about that verse that I just shared with you. And I said, how many in our order take that serious, or how many want to do the traditional thing that supposedly Hindus believe, that they want to be liberated and not come back? And he said, yeah, a few of them clearly do that. He says, but why would we do that? I mean, when we have the opportunity to come back and help others, can you think of anything better to do? And so he said, and that doesn't require liberation. You and I right now, no matter where we are, we can help others. He says, I don't plan on becoming liberated. I got a long way to go. He said, next lifetime, who knows? I may come back as a cockroach. I don't know. He said, but I just hope I'm a very devoted cockroach. Right? And so it's this idea that we will take on a form. We will take on forms, and the form that we take is not relevant. It's what we do in that form. Right? And we see animals, and I know that there are those who don't think that this happens, and that, once you become a human, you can never become an animal again. In our order, we believe that whatever form you need to take to learn the lessons, and if you take a form, and in whatever form that you need to take to help others, once you are liberated, you have the freedom to do that. You have the freedom to make that decision. And you may decide to make that decision. So in the Puranas, in the ancient texts in India, there are so many stories of enlightened animals who then teach, right? And that's really, in fact, it's interesting that one of them is Kakabhusundi. Kakabhusundi is a crow. And in the Ramcharitmanas, he teaches Garuda. Garuda is the eagle, the vehicle for Vishnu, and it's a really interesting interchange. This one crow teaching enlightenment to an eagle, right? And so this idea that there are so many forms, but we will go through all of them, and we will go through all of them maybe countless times. So we're always going to be here. We're always going to be here, meaning here someplace, wherever here is. And we will continue to learn, and we will continue to share, and we will continue to teach each other, and we will continue to learn about what is essential and what is real. And I don't know if I ever told this story, but I had an encounter with a leper. And there was actually a group of lepers. And my teacher and I had just been to the Ganges River. We were in Benares, and we took a bath in the Ganga, in the Ganges. And then we left, and we were on a rickshaw. We were going to the ashram where we were staying. And there was a group of lepers, about 5 males that were sitting there. And this often happens when you're at a holy spot, and there will be poor people, or there'll be lepers out there, and they have a blanket, or they'll have a towel in front of them, and you give them some money. And people, a lot of times, if they're from villages, they'll bring with them rice, and they'll put a handful of rice in each place, right? So I asked my teacher, I said, why do you think he was reborn? This one person I pointed to, I don't know why I chose him, but I said, him, for example, why do you think he got leprosy this lifetime? Do you think he did something wrong in his last lifetime? He said, yeah, that could have been. He said, or not. And so I asked him, what's the or not part? You know, like, what else would be a reason why he would be born a leper? And he said, maybe he is ready for liberation, but there's one lesson that he hasn't learned. And maybe that lesson is humility or something. And maybe being a leper will be the quickest way to get that last teaching. So I looked at the guy very different now. And then he said, I want you to ask him. And I said, ask him? He said, yeah, tomorrow morning, you go, I want you to go sit with him, spend the day sitting with the lepers and talk to him. So I went, okay. So the next day, I showed up, went to the Ganga, bathed, and then went and had a little towel. And I sat down next to that guy. He was sitting at the end, fortunately. And I sat down, put my towel down, sat down next to him and bowed to him. He bowed to me. And I sat there, and the other lepers are looking at me like, what are you doing here? Well, hey, this is our spot. And he didn't do that. He was just very nice. He just, and he didn't say anything. And I just sat there. I didn't know what to say to him. And I figured it will come up, And then he said to me, he said, so what made you decide to come and sit with us today? So I told him what happened. I said, yesterday I was going by, I saw my teacher, I saw you, I asked my teacher about you. He told me there was something you could teach me and that I should come and learn from you. So I'm here to learn from you. And he smiled. He said, what can I teach you? And I said, teach me what you've learned from being a leper. And he said, I've learned humility. I've learned that people are quick to judge you by what you look at on the outside. And he said, I probably have done that to people. And I needed to realize that that's not who people are. He said, people are afraid. There's nothing to fear from me, but yet they're afraid. And he said, it's been a very learning-filled existence. And so I said something to him, and this is what another thing that I've been taught in our order, is that once we leave our body, we take part in the decision-making of where we will be reborn. Like, it's kind of like I look at my transcript and I go, okay, I need this class to fulfill a requirement, and I need this, so these are the classes I'm going to take. When similarly, we will say, okay, these are the things I need to learn. So in which family shall I be born where these lessons can be best learned, right? So I said to him, so if you had to do it over again, would you prefer that you weren't a leper? And he said, of course, everybody would do that. But he said, if I really think about it, the lessons that I've learned as a leper, I don't think I could have learned other ways. So we're all here to learn, right? And some of us have an easy life, right? And some of us have a very difficult life. I was reading quotes from Carl Jung last night. Yes, go ahead, Renee. Yeah. Okay. I can't hear you. You are muted. You're muted. Okay, go ahead.
This might be a good launching point for our group conversation.
Okay.
That was such an amazing story. Did you have a final thing you wanted to say first?
Yeah, so I was reading Carl Jung last night. I was reading quotes from Carl Jung. And one of the things that he says, in several of the quotes, he says, if life's not difficult, you're not growing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
We have people here who are from a lot of different traditions, and those are traditions that have faith, and other traditions that are, I think, a little bit more scientifically based, which I think is a different form of faith, actually. And so I think we could have a very fruitful discussion from the wonderful, wonderful push you gave us. You gave us a great launching pad, Ramdas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cliff, it looks as though you zoomed in. Did you want to start us off?
Well, I do have a question, but I don't necessarily have to be the first one to ask a question.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, Ramdas. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you very much.
I wasn't trying to butt in though, but I do have a question.
Please.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So my question is, as we live our lives, everything around us, it seems like most of us have a tendency to normalize everything, like the sun coming up and going down, or the beautiful ocean just seems like the beautiful normal ocean, and rainbows in Manoa Valley, they're just normal and everything. But fire, especially, is just like, okay, you light a match and there's fire, there's a flame, or you turn on the stove and boom, and then there's fire, and then you can boil some eggs, and it's no big deal. But you blow out the match and the fire goes away, or you turn off the stove top and the flame goes away, and you just go on with your normal life. But if you stop for a minute and think about all these things, they're all miracles. They're all miraculous, especially fire, because it almost seems like fire or flame is not really something of this, of physical existence. It just kind of shows up and then it goes away. And it's like, where did it come from and where did it go? It's almost like the fire is ever present behind the screen of the physical world, and somehow we have these little things like matches to make it appear, but then it goes back into this other realm, which makes you almost think that the fire is ever present, but behind the screen of what our senses can see, but then we can bring it into the sensory realm. And it seems like there's also this part of ourselves that is there throughout our lives. And it seems like it's kind of part of ourselves and not part of ourselves. And I think of it as kind of the watcher. And is that part of ourselves ever present? Kind of like a flame could be ever present, but not beyond the sensory realm?
In Sanskrit, each syllabus, each syllable, each sound has a meaning to it. A is the sun, Ra is fire, Ma is the moon. And so we get Ram. And these are three forms of light. So the sun is the direct light, the moon is the reflected light, and the fire is the light that is in our hands. And all of them are connected. All of them are, and light to us represents wisdom. It represents life and it represents wisdom. And that's why many sadhus always have a sacred fire, right? And they sit with the sacred fire. You don't cook on the sacred fire. The sacred fire is just to observe, to pray in front of. It is said that when you make a deal, traditionally, the way you made a deal, nowadays you sign a contract. Before, you would make a promise in front of a fire. So if we're going to make a deal, we're going to make a decision, we want a contract, we light a fire and we speak in front of the fire, because the fire represents the divine. the fire represents that eternity. And so we are speaking in front of the divine, because fire is, like you said, it just manifests. It's ever present. And at times it becomes visible and then it goes away, but it is inherent in everything. So there was one of the tantric practices that we would do wood can never be cleaned. So if you have a wooden bowl, I mean, Indians are real obsessed, Hindus especially, very obsessed with cleanliness. And so if you have a clay bowl, because of all the little porousness in the clay, you can never really clean it once it gets in. And my saliva will be in there no matter how much I clean it. Wood is the same way, it's porous. So how do you, but yet you see sadhus have wooden pots, or a wooden, like a commando, which is a gourd pot. How do you clean that? Well, you clean it with mantra. It's a tantric mantra that you clean it with. And the mantra, the definition of the mantra, the explanation of the mantra is, as you're pouring water on it, and in this water there is fire. In the earth from where this came, there is fire. In the entire universe, there is fire. And by the strength of these fires, this pot is pure. Right? And it's like simply affirming the reality that fire is ever present, and fire represents light, and fire represents wisdom, and fire represents purity. And so the fire is the closest that we can have to divinity right in front of us.
I've never been able to put it in those words. I really appreciate the way you enunciated the question. Because just a candle is a miracle. And it seems like it's so representative. Well, we talk about our inextinguishable flame.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an analogy. Any physical flame, though, can be blown out. Mm-hmm. So what is it that is the inextinguishable flame? And so you're talking about that flame which kind of stands behind the visible realm. And it peeks out sometimes, like you say, when we strike a match, then it's in the physical realm. But we know from what science tells us and what Ramdas reminded us of, that no energy can ever be created or destroyed in the universe. It can only be transformed. So when that candle, and the flame of that candle is snuffed out, blown out, where did it go? Like you say, it's somewhere behind the screen.
Yeah, it's the manifest and the unmanifest.
Yeah. Oh, it looks like Elizabeth has an idea for us.
Hi. Sorry about no video. I'm between cameras. Yes, the unmanifest and the manifest is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I am a scientist, biologist, as most of you know. But I've been very interested in that. And a long time ago, I started to explore past lives and got very interested in the unmanifest. As far as I understand it, has no time space element to it. Time space is something we do to order the physical part of what I call the great spectrum of body mind continuum of vibrations. And so I thought, well, maybe all my incarnations are present in the eternal now. They must be present in the eternal now. So I started to do meditations, calling in my other incarnations to see if I was doing my part in an exploration that I came to see as kind of a lotus blossom with some core soul that explores through different lives, possibly the same kind of question. And so they would come into my circle, and some of these past lives came to me after a few times that psychics had told me about past lives, and I began to do the kinds of meditations that you can explore them through. So anyway, that's just this morning I was reading this long, detailed exploration by quantum scientists about what's the real deep reality, and it seemed to me that they were so muddled because Western science has such a hard time getting at the dematerializing end of the spectrum, right? They can only work in matter, and they want to measure things with physical instruments, so they can't measure consciousness and spirit and all these things. While the Eastern sciences that the quantum scientists turn to were at the opposite end of that keyboard of vibrations, as I call it, and just derive the whole keyboard simply by slowing the vibrations down through electromagnetic energy into matter in the end. So it depends on, looking at the same universe from different perspectives can give you opposite answers to questions like, does consciousness create matter, or does matter create consciousness? So I'm all for the consciousness creates matter, looking at things from that end of the keyboard where you can see all of it. And I wonder, Ramdas, what you would say about this possibility of accessing other incarnations now when you go into that realm of meditation.
Well, first of all, thank you for great question and great comments. And I think that there's real. We could talk for an hour about this, but two things. First of all, consciousness creating matter as opposed to matter creating consciousness. I watch matter. I've seen matter all my life. I've never seen it create anything, but I've seen consciousness create matter, because everything that is here comes from somebody's mind. I've built homes, and I look at that home started in my mind. Right, Cliff, I know you know exactly what I mean. You imagine something, you envision something, and then you manifest it. So it's consciousness creating matter. Matter doesn't create consciousness, and unfortunately, our scientist does have things a bit wrong on that way, and so I agree with you. The other thing that you mentioned, just before that, you mentioned something. I'm trying to remember what it was. That I had a comment about that as well. But anyway, the issue of consciousness is time and place. Okay. So David Bohm, you talk about quantum physicists. David Bohm is the one who gets it, or who got it. And he was a student of Einstein's, but he was also a student of Krishnamurti's. And he talks about the holographic model of the universe, and that the universe is a hologram, and our minds are just interpreting a three-dimensional universe. But he says all that energy comes from a place beyond time and space. That's what his theory is. That's what he says. It is beyond time and place. So time and place are just part of the dualism, part of the temporalness of life. Once we move beyond that, and once we connect to the beyond that, then we realize we were always here and we will always be here, because everything is now. There's only now. Everything else is an imagination, a fantasy, a hope. But now is all that exists. And so time and place are clearly illusory. But they function, and we have created a great illusion that we function in. But when we can step out of it, then we can see that I have been here many times. I am here in many forms. I can be and am anything and everything, and I will be. And so everything that I ever experience, I'm experiencing now. Everything that I will ever experience, I'm experiencing now, someplace. And then there are those who do practices to connect to those places, and I totally believe that.
So if you agree with that, then how do you reconcile the kind of linear model of sequential incarnations until you have learned it all, if all of them are already there in the now? It's because
Sure.
you have a choice in every physical life.
Mm-hmm. You go to a salad bar, everything is right there. Which one do you pick? It's not like you're going to pick one and then they're going to create another thing. It's all
But
there
is-
right now.
Is one of those ingredients in the salad the ultimate learning ingredient?
Yeah, it's all ultimate learning. I mean, as you know, as a scientist, you know, the aha moment is like, I got it, right? And what does it do? It simply begins another question. So every answer actually creates another question, and that's the beauty of life. It keeps us going, and eventually we will realize that it's all just a wonderful play. It's a divine play, you know. Shakespeare's all the world's a game, all the world's a play, and all men and women are
Stage.
players.
All the world's a stage.
All the world's a stage, yes,
Yeah.
and all men are. It's this, what an amazing, beautiful stage.
I wonder what Diana might have to say on this question of
And I think Ray had to have
multiple lives. Oh, okay. In the last,
Yeah.
right after
Okay.
Diana.
Oh,
Mhm.
hi. I've been trying to figure out how I verbalize this because I don't know. And this is not coming, this is just my belief. So I do meditation, but I don't know all the scriptures and all that kind of stuff. And I believe we are spirits in a body. We're not a body with a spirit. We're all one. We all are, where there's no separation. And the body is one. It's not like the body is separate from the oneness. And it's like when we can really feel that oneness, it's like experiencing the oneness while in the body is a very gift. And it's like allowing ourselves to use practices so that we can feel that divine love and divine wisdom and oneness at the same time about being in the body. And it's a gift to be in the body. I didn't want to be in my body most of my life. And when I finally got that it was okay, I really see the gift of being in the body because we can experience love and share that. And that we are here to encourage others and ourselves. And I've done a lot of past life work and to be an intergalactic work, which if we're going to get into that, I mean, it's like there's also the intergalactic component. It's not just this little
yeah.
and
Absolutely.
that is all one. And so it's like when I think of the transition out of the body, I really loved your talk. You know, it's like it really put words into something that I don't use the words in the same way, but I love the body being completed and it served its purpose because, you know, it's like death is just a transition to the oneness. And I believe that we make choices in our higher self or our something about what lessons we learn. You know, I don't think we have lessons so we're being punished. I believe we choose lessons to learn something.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And does someone choose to be a leopard? I don't think so, maybe, but or be raped or be starving. I don't think so. And it's not a punishment by God by any means.
No,
I think
absolutely not.
just where we're at. And so it's what do we do with those lessons? But for me, really getting in touch with that sense of oneness and abiding in that place and taking that way of living and loving and doing it while I am embodied in this earth is such a gift. And I think that that's what we are all each given is how do we live that light? I would say we're all angels in a body. You know, that's
Sure.
One of the things I believe in. It's like, and yet how do we manifest that when we have an interaction with a cup or with a person or with anything in our lives? And so I just thought the talk this is an excellent topic and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah. There are a variety of Ramayana tales, right? And Still the Moving Center has some beautiful performances, right, of the Ramayana, and it's been written hundreds of times in different languages, and in one of them in the Ananda Ramayana, which is about a 10th century Sanskrit text. In it, Ram is out searching for Sita, and he comes upon Hanuman, and he asks Hanuman, "Who are you?" And Hanuman says, Deha buddhi tudasoham. So as a body, I'm your servant. But as the soul, I'm an extension of you. But as eternal soul, you and I are one. This is my firm belief.
Yeah.
And Ram goes, oh, okay.
Oh, great answer.
Thank you.
Let's see, Dad, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, Cliff's question about fire and the subject today when our family is dealing with the physical departure of one of our loved ones, Grandpa Bob, and then it just brought back memories when I was traveling in India and about fire related to death, because it's a way of disposing of the physical body. And I witnessed the attempts to burn the body if the family was rich enough to have wood to actually burn it. Otherwise, it would just swept in the Ganges. So,
yeah, and that's a very sad situation. The cost of wood today is terrible in India for that reason.
So I just prompted or helped me recall some memories I had of that physical choice each culture has to make about disposing of the physical body.
Well, you know, there's an interesting thing that happened in Benares. So the tradition in India is that when you die, if you die in Benares, then Shiva is there to chant the name of Ram in your ear, and then that guarantees you either liberation or at least another human body. And so dying in Benares is very important. So a lot of elderly people will go to Benares to die. And so there's a lot of people dying in Benares. And so there are cremations every day. I mean, going on all the time, sometimes 7, 8 cremations at a time are going on. And the cost of wood has gotten to the point where poor people can't afford the wood. And so there was the priest of the oldest Hanuman temple in North India is a temple called Sankatamochan. It's in Benares. And the priest of that temple, or not the priest, but he's the head of the temple. And a friend of mine, also, he was a chemical engineer at Benares Hindu University, a teacher, but he decided to start an electric crematorium, and the priests just freaked out. They said, "Oh, you're trying to destroy our traditions. You create this electric crematorium. This is not in the Vedas. This is not the way we do it. We're supposed to burn the body and then put the ashes in the Ganga. And it's so terrible. How can you be a head of such an important temple and make this statement?" And he said, "You're wrong." He says, "We're not following the Vedic injunctions. The Vedic injunctions are burn the body completely and then put it in." How many bodies are being half burned or quarter burned or just thrown in the river because they can't afford the money. So they can't afford it. And in those days, and this was in 1994 when we had that discussion, in those days, it cost about 800 rupees to burn a body. And 800 rupees in those days, a worker, a laborer made about 75 to 100 rupees a day. So that's like 2 weeks work, maybe. It could be, to make that money. And a lot of people just did not have it. And the electricity to burn a body, 50 rupees. Right. And so he went ahead and he pushed it through. And now everybody is so much happier that people can afford a cremation now in Benares with the electric crematorium. And the wealthy people will go and they'll do the burn with the wood and stuff. But it has made it possible where poor people can now follow that practice. So it's important for us to be present. We understand that we are not the body, that we are eternal, but then there's the elements like that you just mentioned, that in that dualistic existence that we participate in, we need to help those who are having a hard time navigating it.
There's another question that provoked a memory that I have of traveling in or visiting a friend in Bombay, and who was a member of another culture, Indian culture, the Jain, and he was telling me about their disposing of the bodies of the families by putting them on a tower and letting the
Those are Parsis.
Oh,
The Parsis.
yeah, sorry.
Yep.
And this tradition calls for the birds to scavengers to
The vultures. Yeah.
clean the body, and then they sweep the bones into the bottom of the tower, which is built out over the ocean in Bombay.
Mhm.
So
And the problem there is that where the Tower of Life is, the Parsi, and I've been to where the early Parsi temples were in Mumbai. Mumbai has gotten so big that there's no place for the vultures to live anywhere near there. The vultures are now, before the vultures lived within a few miles and they would fly in there. Now the vultures are so far away, and the habitat for the vultures is essentially gone. And so vultures don't come back anymore. So they put bodies up there and they just start rotting and they sink, and then people get upset, and it's caused a whole new issue, and they've had to rethink what they do, so it's fascinating. We have these beautiful practices, and then like life life comes in and says, you can't do that practice anymore, and it forces us to be mobile. It forces us to change, and it forces us to accept that there's a dualistic reality, and we must constantly deal with it in ways that we can survive and that we can keep following our path to oneness. We can't get comfortable.
thank you.
Even with the fire of eternal change,
Yeah.
we have to continue that path. Cliff.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking there's this other fire that we take for granted out here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is the volcanoes that we live around, especially Diana. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Mary, but I was wondering if this idea of the inextinguishable flame or fire, how the Hawaiians in their culture see fire.
I honestly don't know, because I haven't really learned much that way. I do know that fire was here before Pele came. She was not the one that brought the fire. There's older legends, older stories about the mud hen, I think, that had fire, and man wanted to have fire for himself. So he caught the mud hen and took the fire from the mud hen. But that's as my extent of the Hawaiian history. But I will add on fire, from my Catholic background, the Holy Spirit descended upon the apostles after Jesus ascended into heaven, and they were given wisdom. That's when the apostles were able to speak in tongues, when they were able to communicate with people from very different areas of the Palestine and those areas. And so fire is very holy. It's, like you said, wisdom, represents wisdom. And in the Hawaiian culture, the kukui is the candle nut tree. And the Hawaiians would string the nuts onto a palm frond, or the spine of a frond, and they would light it. And so it's also considered wisdom and enlightenment in the kukui.
Yeah.
Mary, how does this, what we've talked about today, fit in the Christian tradition, in your understanding?
It's different. It's different. The Blessed Mother said that we only will have one life. We do not come back. And, everybody's different. We have different experiences, and we don't dump on somebody else just because they disagree with ours. And I'm so grateful for this group. We're so loving, honestly, that the same, that we come back, we get different ideas. Sometimes it hurts my head because I'm not very scientific, but I'm so blessed to be part of this. Thank you, Renee. Thank you all.
For us all to be together and be able to share, this is what makes life meaningful. I mentioned earlier David Bohm, the quantum physicist, And one of his last writings was called On Dialogue. And basically he is saying what life is about is what we're doing right now. This is what makes life rich, to just be able, different people to get together and share our ideas, experiences of life. This is what makes it meaningful.
I so agree with you, Ramdas. I feel that exact way myself. This is what makes life meaningful to me. It is incredible that we have an assembly of people here, some of whom have experienced after-death states and returned, some of whom who have experienced what seems, at least, to have been other lifetimes. So both of those kinds of experience do point to this idea of immortality. And yet then there are others who just simply from a scientific perspective, with this idea that energy can never disappear from the universe, get the sense that, well, then this energy that's me, it must not ever disappear. It must never like cease to be, even though it may cease to appear to be. It simply must change form in some way or another.
Yeah.
So from all these different perspectives, it seems as though this idea of our inextinguishable flame can make sense. And it's so valuable to compare notes with one another and see where these different perspectives crisscross and reinforce each other, and then where they don't, and wonder, well, I wonder why not. And I wonder what light that sheds as well, the disagreements, or they're not seeing things from the same perspective, shall we say. I do want to thank Ramdas so much. He has such a breadth of experience. He speaks to us from his personal experience in the Hindu tradition, and also then as a religious studies professor, he's able to pull in all these different thoughts from other ones of the different religions, many of which are the Eastern religions. So that is very beneficial for us. And I want to thank you so much for that, Ramdas. And just the personal experiences that you bring, for example, sitting down next to a leper and speaking to him about why he's inhabiting that body. What an incredible conversation to share with us. Next week, we're having our dear Bob Buss, who's with us today, and he's going to speak from a Buddhist perspective on the good law. And the week after that is going to be the week in India of Mahashivaratri, Vigil Night of Shiva. And that topic will be our inward eye, our third eye. And we're going to have another practicing Hindu, Piyush Kumar, who will give that presentation to start us off that week. So we have a lot to look forward to, as always.
Yeah.